Full and honest review of the Garden Tower 2 after long-term use. I bought this one in August 2024 and it's now January 2026, so it's been about 18 months. I bought my second one in May 2025 and it's been about 8 months for that one. I'm going to talk through all the things that I love about this product, as well as some of the things that are not my favorite about it. Let's get into it. At its core, this is a continuous soil column system. It holds about 6 cubic feet of soil and up to 50 plants with one connected soil column, not stacked pots. That single column design affects watering, nutrients, weight, and long-term soil health. They recommend using Happy Frog potting soil, which is what I used on both of the towers. First, let's talk about the watering design. There is no built-in watering system, and the intent is that you manually water from the top, and that water drains all the way through the soil, soaking the entire soil column, and then draining into a drawer at the bottom. Whatever water is collected into that drawer has passed through the vermicompost in the compost tower, and therefore has become a compost tea, and so they recommend taking the drawer out and pouring that compost tea back on top of the tower. This watering design is great if you intend to hand water. I'll get into more on watering later in the video. Let's get into the vermicompost system. This is a core feature of the product. This right here is the lid that covers up a tower or a column that's right in the center of the garden tower, and that column is meant for vermicompost. So what you're supposed to do is fill it at a 3-in-1 ratio of browns and greens, and you put that in here, and then when you're setting up your tower initially, you're going to add around 200 to 300 red wiggler worms. The center column has holes in it all throughout the tower so that the worms are able to move in and out of that center column as needed. They'll move into the center core and break down those food scraps. Then they'll move back into the soil and move around and aerate the soil and drop worm castings as they go. They'll also compost in place in the center core and drop some castings in there as well. That's why it's called vermicompost. It's a mixture of worm castings and compost. When it comes time to harvest the vermicompost, what you're going to do is remove the gate that's at the bottom of the tower. This is a gate that separates the vermicompost tower from that bottom drawer where the water collects. So you'll pull it right out, then you'll take the cover off of the compost column right here, and it's recommended that you also purchase the compost crank to push down your compost into the drawer. You can, using a push and twist motion simultaneously, you can push that compost down and into the drawer to harvest the vermicompost. Now realistically, you're going to get finished compost and also unfinished compost when you push it into that drawer. You're going to have to do some level of separating those parts when you're harvesting. And your unfinished compost is going to go right back into that center compost column after you put the gate back in. The finished vermicompost is meant to be spread throughout the tower on top and into the pockets. And the idea is that you do this on a continuous basis, so you're continually building up your soil nutrition. The intent of the design here is to have a closed loop system that doesn't need outside soil amendments. But there are some real trade-offs to having a compost column in the center of your growing space. The first one I've noticed after using the tower for a while is that if you let this weight build up too much, the pressure that you're putting on the gate on the bottom of the tower prevents you from easily pulling the drawer out and putting it back in. So that water recycling gets a little bit more difficult as the compost column fills up. You can solve this by harvesting your vermicompost a little more frequently. Another downside is that your plant roots can and will grow straight into that center compost column if you're not twisting that compost up on a monthly basis. They recommend buying the compost crank twist for another $50 to keep those plant roots out of your compost column. If you let the plant roots grow into the compost column, it's going to be really, really difficult to harvest your compost. The third downside that I've been struggling with personally for the last few months is that the center compost column seems to attract critters. I'm not sure if it's mice or rats or squirrels. It's something that is digging into my pockets and then digging and looking for that compost. On their way to reach the compost, they're digging up my crops that are planted into the pockets. There's a few different ways to solve that problem, and it probably depends where you are and where you're planting your garden tower. For me, I am outside in the open space. There's no screened-in lanai over me, and so this is exposed to the critters. And so I have no physical protection for the critters. So what I've done temporarily is empty out my center compost column and fill it with soil. And then I set out traps to try to decrease the population of the rats. I'm pretty sure it's rats. I just don't want to admit that it's rats. Now, I'm not blaming the garden tower for this. I also recently removed my in-bed vermicompost buckets from my raised beds right behind me. And it's for the exact same reason. Overnight, the critters would be digging, trying to reach that compost, and disturbing the roots and ruining the crops nearby. So in the meantime, to solve that problem, I have filled my center compost column with soil, and I've been using my indoor electric composter. But I also set out traps to try to decrease the population of the rats. And I'm definitely going to find a way to get back to using that vermicompost column as designed. But right now, it's either have the compost column working properly and then at the expense of having harvestable crops in the tower. If you're in Florida, it's very common to have some screened-in lanais. One of my neighbors across the pond right over there has a garden tower, and she has it in the screened-in lanai. And she definitely, I can tell you, is not dealing with a critter problem like me. Or if you have a pool cage and you put your garden tower in there, you would be protected from this problem. And we can't forget that compost is not really supposed to be smelly at all. If it's correctly balanced, meaning a 3-to-1 ratio of browns and greens and nothing is too wet in there, it shouldn't smell at all, and it probably shouldn't even attract the critters in the first place. So it's very likely that I had my balance off and it was attracting the critters. And now I'm trying to get rid of any lingering pheromones or smells to keep them out of the garden tower. So I would say that this struggle is very site-specific, so it may not even apply to you. When the vermicompost column works without some critters ruining it, it has some real benefits. It really is some true closed-loop nutrition for your planting system. And it certainly helps build your soil health long-term. And because the compost column is in the center and it's surrounded by so much soil, it has this insulation effect that protects the worms from any super hot Florida summer days or any really cold winter days up north. One of the things that really drew me to buy this garden tower in the first place was its focus on soil building and soil health. To me, that sounds so much better than traditional container gardening where people are dumping the soil and replacing it every few seasons, or they're doing some major amendments to it. Now, if you're in a cold climate, there are some special things to be aware of. On their website, they recommend winterizing your garden tower by removing any crops out of the soil and emptying out that compost tower. And when you empty out that compost column, go ahead and put it in a bucket and keep your worms safe for the winter. You can put them in a garage or a basement, wherever your temperatures are somewhat regulated, but not quite as cold as outside. Now let's talk about airflow and plant density. This tower can hold up to 50 plants in a really small amount of space. And so you're talking really dense plantings and your leaves are basically touching from plant to plant. And this can contribute to poor airflow if you're not properly harvesting or you're not properly pruning your plants. And if you have poor airflow, a lot of times you're creating an environment that's a little bit more prone to diseases. Another thing worth noting is that I find it really difficult to transplant crops into the pockets of the garden tower. It's easiest if you have like plug size starts, but if you have like a 4 or 6 inch start from the nursery, it's going to be really difficult to put that plant and all that soil into the garden tower. When it comes to spinning the garden tower, I love that the internal bearing track is built into the tower. You don't need a separate piece of equipment to buy to get it to spin. But I will say, you're going to notice some real resistance when this is full of soil, and especially if it's moist soil and you're trying to turn it. Now, the height and the stability of this product is great. and its diameter is pretty wide, so it ends up being really stout and heavy, and I really have no concerns that this thing's going to blow over. I'm part of their Facebook group, and I have never seen anyone say that theirs blows over, and I'm sure it's because it weighs like 200 pounds when it's full. They also have these legs that come with it there's 3 of them that are supposed to be installed, but it actually lifts the tower up off the ground. And then this is where you would install the wheels if you wanted to buy the separate casters. But I have mine sitting on a 24-inch square paver, and if I were to put the legs on it, the legs would be sticking out over that paver. And I really enjoy the look of the garden tower much better without the legs. So I didn't install them, and I have mine sitting on a paver in the middle of a mulch bed. Let's go back to the bottom drawer for a minute. You can see I pushed away some excess soil that was on the ground. That is from the critters that are digging in it and pulling all the soil out. The drawer is meant for collecting excess water and also for harvesting your vermicompost. My problem is that I don't manually hand water. If it were up to me and I had to hand water something, I will kill it. So what I've done is set up a drip irrigation system. If you take a look on this side, you can see this black shepherd's hook that's draping over the top of the garden tower. I routed some poly tubing up that shepherd's hook, and then I transitioned to emitter line, and I spiraled that emitter line through the garden tower. And then I put it on an automatic timer so I can adjust the watering schedule as it changes through the seasons. My problem with that design is that when I didn't have it perfectly dialed in and it was overwatering, the water would drain into that bottom drawer, but then that bottom drawer would fill up and the water in the soil had nowhere to go but evaporate. And if I wasn't out here checking and pulling that drawer out and emptying it, my plants were getting majorly waterlogged. And I ended up killing a lot of strawberry plants that way last year. So what I did to fix it was I drilled 2 small holes in the bottom of that bottom drawer to let the water drain out. Do you see that hole right there? And this hole right there. It's really small, really discreet, but it does allow the water to drip right out. Now, I don't recommend doing this. I chose to do it because I heard you can just buy another drawer for like 40 or 50 bucks if something goes wrong, and I really desperately needed it to drain. I really wish they would incorporate some way to drain if you're using a different watering system than they designed. One of the potential upsides to having the drawer catch all the water is the indoor use potential. Garden Tower Project does say it's okay to grow indoors with this garden tower because of the water collection into the drawer. And they also sell 3 vertical grow lights to provide enough light for your vegetables indoors. But it does come with a price tag. It's like $700 for the 3 grow lights. But what happens if you ever want to move your garden tower? Well, me, with my setup where I've removed my legs and I don't have any wheels installed and it's sitting on a paver in the middle of a mulch bed, I'm pretty much not moving my garden tower unless I disassemble it and remove all the soil. If you wanted the ability to move it around, I would highly recommend putting the legs on it, and I would highly recommend buying the wheels that they sell separately. Those are about $100, maybe $120 on their website. But they do look like really nice heavy-duty casters and not those really cheap office chair type wheels. I also love that this tower is 100% made in the USA, and it's a small family-owned business. And as far as the quality, I mean, you can tell it is top-notch quality. This is HDPE plastic, very tough, no issues with it whatsoever, and it comes with a 5-year warranty. When it comes to accessories, they offer very little products. They have the grow lights that I've mentioned before, and they offer the casters or the wheels that I've mentioned before, and they have the compost crank. They don't sell anything like trellises or like a frost or insect cover for the whole thing, which can be a downside. Personally, I love it when a gardening product has a lot of options for accessories. It just opens the door for what you can grow in it. And it makes your life easier if you just buy the thing that's designed to work with the product. The cost of one of these towers is around $400, so it comes with a pretty steep price tag. It's up to you to decide whether it's worth it to you or not to have this closed loop system for nutrition for your plants. And the vertical growing allows you to put so many plants in a small footprint of space. I can tell you I love my garden towers, but there is a little bit of a learning curve that I'm going through when it comes to watering, drainage, and keeping the critters out of it. If you decide the system is for you, I'll put a purchase link in the description box so you can use it and help support the channel. It doesn't give you a discount off, but it does help me continue to do some long-term reviews like this. And next week, I'm planning on publishing a video that compares specifically strawberry growing in a green stock, garden tower, and a raised bed. So hit that subscribe button if you're interested in that video, and use my link if you're interested in buying a garden tower. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.